Hey, I didn't see you there. I was just trying to look at an onion cell. I think there's something more I need to do. Anyway, we're starting our chapter on cells and what you need to know about cells. There's two different kinds that we're going to be talking about. We've looked at single-celled organisms, but we are going to look at plant cells and animal cells. And what you need to know is all the different organelles, all the bits and pieces in the cell and what they do. There are two types of cells. There are eukaryotic and prokaryotic. Animal cells, plant cells, all of the cells that have a nucleus are eukaryotic. The other kind of cells are prokaryotic, and those are like bacteria. They're little teeny tiny things, and they have no nucleus. All of their genetic material, all their DNA is just kind of floating around inside the cell. So that's what, when you hear the difference, prokaryotic, eukaryotic, you have eukaryotic cells. That's a good way to remember it. One way to think of a cell is if you imagine that all the bits and pieces of the cell work together, like a factory, like a city. And you could also think of it as a cell being like you. You have all your organs. You have a stomach, you have a brain, you have a heart, you have lungs, everything working together to make you function. And each individual cell also has things inside of it to help it function, and those are called organelles. So we're going to list the organelles, and I'll tell you what is important about each one of them and how it keeps the cell functioning. The first part of the cell we're going to talk about is the part that holds it all together. That's the cell membrane. The cell membrane, imagine it being a water balloon, and the balloon is the cell membrane, and everything inside the water balloon is the organelles and everything else, right? So the cell membrane holds everything together. In a plant cell has a cell membrane, but it also has something called a cell wall. The cell wall is made of cellulose, and it's really rigid. The reason for that is if it didn't have a cell wall, the plant, as it grew out of the ground, would just go and just grow out, because it would not be able to stand up, and plants need to stand up. Plants don't have bones. We have bones, so we don't need a cell wall. Our bones are what make us stand up. Inside the cells, one thing they all have is stuff called cytoplasm. It's this jelly-like stuff, and all of the organelles are floating around in it. So on our diagram, we're going to color that yellow. All right, let's talk about the boss. The most important part of the cell is the nucleus. It's the control center of the cell. It tells all the other cell parts what to do, and it contains DNA. So DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, is the stuff that tells your body who it is, what it should be doing. So the DNA that you get half from your mom and half from your dad, and it tells you whether you have blue eyes or brown eyes. It tells you how long your fingers are going to be and what shape your nose is going to be and stuff like that. Plants have the same thing. It tells them what kind of plant they're going to be, what color the flower might be.
You'll notice that in the nucleus on our plant cell drawing that there's this thing here and these little things here. The stringy things are representing DNA. That smaller circle, that's called a nucleolus. And we consider the nucleolus, it does all kinds of fancy things. And sometimes you can call it the brain of the brain, so the brain inside the nucleus. But we're not going to worry about that. It's very complicated. So what we're going to do instead is just color the whole thing black. The whole thing is the nucleus.
So we have all of that contained in a nucleus, and the nucleus is surrounded by a membrane of its own because there's things that it doesn't want to get in and things that it needs to send out. Let's talk about the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. The mitochondria is really important because it's going to take everything you need, nutrients, and convert it into energy to make everything work. So mitochondria also contains a little bit of the genetic information, so a little bit of DNA in there also. But they call it the powerhouse because that's where the energy is going to come from to get everything that the cell needs to keep functioning that way. Another really important part is really fun to say, so it'll make you sound really smart if you say endoplasmic reticulum, also known as the ER. The endoplasmic reticulum, there's two kinds. There's rough and smooth. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum are just like little highways through the cell, and they just carry substances, molecules, things all around the cell. The rough endoplasmic reticulum have these little tiny pieces called ribosomes attached to them. Ribosomes are their own organelle. I'll get to that in a minute. The ribosomes are little protein factories. They are either attached to the endoplasmic reticulum or they're floating around in the cytoplasm, right? So we have, let me review here, we have the mitochondria that we're coloring orange. Mitochondria, they kind of look like a loaf of bread. Yeah, that's what I think. You have the rough endoplasmic reticulum. The rough endoplasmic reticulum is dark blue. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum is light blue. And then you have the little ribosomes, some attached to the endoplasmic reticulum. Those are the red dots. But you also have the floating around free red dots that are also ribosomes. The Golgi body, also called the Golgi apparatus, think of that as a packaging, so like a post office. That's going to take substances, molecules, and things, and it's going to package them so that it can send things out of the cell.
I don't have pink, so I'm just going to shade it really lightly with a red pencil.
Lysosomes. Now, lysosomes are only in animal cells. They're not in plant cells. The lysosomes are the cleanup crew. They're the parts that take out waste and get rid of things. The lysosomes, the cleanup crew, I remember that because Lysol is something that we use to disinfect things and clean things up. So the lysosomes are the cleanup crew in the cell. Vacuoles. Vacuoles are like little pockets, and if you remember in the microscopic organisms, we talked about food vacuoles. Each cell has a vacuole and it contains water and waste and food and stuff like that. In the animal cell, there's lots of little vacuoles, right? In a plant cell, the vacuole is really big. That kind of plumps it up. It also will help support it. So in animal cells, a bunch of little tiny vacuoles. But in a plant cell, the vacuole, which we're going to leave clear, the vacuole, if a plant doesn't have enough water, that vacuole starts to shrink. And if you think about a plant when it doesn't get enough water, right? What does it look like? It wilts, right? So a plant that doesn't have enough water, the vacuoles start to shrink and the whole plant starts to wilt. Okay, so vacuoles are very important. All right, the one thing we haven't talked about is the chloroplasts. Those are only found in plant cells. They're green, and the chloroplast is what the plant uses to convert sunlight into energy. It's green, it's filled with something called chlorophyll, and it's able to take the sunlight, just like we said the euglena, that's autotroph and heterotroph, the autotrophic part of it, same thing. It's going to convert sunlight into energy so the plant can live without worrying about going out to find food, right? Now, Venus flytrap is a whole different story. We're not going to talk about that just yet. So, did I cover everything? I think I covered everything. What do you see? What do you see? Is that dinner?